"You ain't nothing but a fake Jackson." The venomous words cut through the thunderous applause of 18,000 fans like a blade through silk. Michael Jackson froze mid-spin during his signature move in Smooth Criminal, and what happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in concert history. But nobody in the forum that night was prepared for how the king of pop would handle this hostile confrontation. It was September 23rd, 1996, at the legendary Forum in Inglewood, California, and Michael Jackson was delivering what many considered one of the most powerful performances of his HI Story World Tour. The crowd was electric, feeding off Michael's energy as he moved through his greatest hits with the precision and passion that had made him the most famous entertainer on the planet. Michael had just finished an explosive version of Black or White and was transitioning into Smooth Criminal when the disruption happened. The voice belonged to Tony Martinez, a 34-year-old unemployed factory worker from East LA who had been drowning his sorrows in overpriced arena beer since the doors opened 3 hours earlier. Tony wasn't just any heckler. He was a man whose world had been falling apart piece by piece for the past 6 months. He'd lost his job at the automotive plant when the company moved operations to Mexico. His girlfriend had left him, taking their 2 kids with her. He'd been evicted from his apartment just last week and was sleeping on his cousin's couch, feeling like a complete failure at life. In his alcohol-clouded mind, Tony had convinced himself that celebrities like Michael Jackson represented everything that was wrong with the world. Here was a man who had never worked a real job, never struggled to pay rent, never felt the crushing weight of failure that Tony carried every single day. And yet Michael was worshipped by millions while Tony couldn't even get a call back for a minimum wage job. "You hear me, Jackson?" Tony shouted again, his voice carrying clearly over the crowd noise. "You're nothing but a pretty boy fake who's never faced a real challenge in your life." The music stopped. The band, confused and alarmed, gradually ceased playing as 18,000 people turned to locate the source of the disturbance. Michael Jackson stood center stage, his sequined shirt catching the spotlight, staring directly at this swaying, belligerent man in section 104. Michael's first instinct was to handle it with the grace and humor he'd developed over decades of live performance. "Well, hello there, friend," Michael said into his microphone, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that had charmed audiences worldwide. "Looks like we've got ourselves a music critic in the house tonight." The crowd laughed nervously, expecting this gentle deflection to either embarrass the heckler into silence or prompt security to escort him out. Most disruptions ended exactly this way, with the troublemaker backing down once they became the center of attention. But Tony Martinez wasn't most hecklers. "Don't you friend me?" Tony screamed back, his voice cracking with emotion and rage. "I'm talking to you, superstar. You think you're so special with your fancy dancing and your million-dollar costumes? Why don't you come down here and prove you're anything more than a spoiled rich boy?" The atmosphere in the forums shifted dramatically. This wasn't just drunken nonsense anymore. This was a direct, personal challenge that everyone could feel escalating. The joyful energy that had filled the arena moments before was replaced by an uncomfortable tension that made people shift in their seats. Michael stood at the microphone for a long moment, studying this angry man whose pain was now visible to everyone in the venue. Security guards were already moving toward Tony's section, radios crackling with urgent communications. But Michael held up a hand to stop them. "Sir," Michael said, his voice still calm but carrying a new edge, "you paid good money to be here tonight, just like everyone else. How about we all just enjoy the music together?" "I don't want to enjoy your music," Tony yelled back, his voice breaking slightly. "I want to see if you're anything more than a mama's boy who shakes his hips for screaming teenagers. Show me you're a real man." That last comment hit Michael in a way that was visible to everyone in the arena. His famous smile disappeared completely and his jaw tightened. The crowd was getting restless. Some people were booing Tony, others were shouting for security to remove him, and a few were actually encouraging the confrontation. But then Tony did something that changed everything. Fueled by liquid courage and months of pent-up frustration, he started pushing his way toward the stage. He shoved past other concert-goers, climbed over barriers, and fought through security personnel who were trying to intercept him. "You want to hide behind your bodyguards?" Tony screamed as he somehow made it to the edge of the stage. "Face me like a man!" The forum erupted in chaos. People were screaming, some standing on their seats to get a better view, others heading for the exits. Security guards rushed toward the stage, ready to tackle Tony and drag him away from Michael. But Michael Jackson did something that shocked everyone, including his own band and crew. "Let him come up," Michael said firmly, his voice carrying through the sound system with absolute authority. "Let him say what he came here to say." The security team hesitated, uncertain whether they'd heard correctly. Michael's tour manager was frantically gesturing from the wings, but Michael ignored him completely. "You want to know if I'm real?" Michael said, walking directly toward Tony as the man climbed onto the stage. "You think I'm just some fake pretty boy who's never faced adversity?" The forum went dead silent. 18,000 people held their breath, unsure whether they were about to witness a fight, a breakdown, or something else entirely. Michael looked directly at Tony, who was now standing just a few feet away, and said, "Well, friend, I'll tell you what. You're here now, so let's settle this like gentlemen." The audience erupted, some cheering, others shouting warnings, everyone on their feet. But Michael wasn't done. "You want to prove something?" Michael said to Tony, who was swaying slightly but maintaining eye contact. "Let's prove it. But we're not going to fight like animals. We're going to settle this the way artists settle things." Tony, emboldened by the attention and the alcohol, stepped closer. "Damn right we are," he shouted. The crowd expected violence. The tension was electric. Security was positioning themselves, and everyone was bracing for the worst. Instead, Michael made a proposal that no one saw coming. "Here's what we're going to do," Michael said, his voice suddenly taking on that smooth, confident tone that had launched 1,000 dreams. "We're going to have ourselves a singing competition. You and me, right here, right now. You think you can do what I do? Prove it." The suggestion was so unexpected, so completely different from what anyone thought was going to happen, that it took several seconds for the crowd to process it. A singing competition? This drunk heckler versus Michael Jackson in a singing contest at the forum. Then someone in the audience started laughing. Then someone else. Within moments, the entire arena was filled with laughter, applause, and cheers. The tension that had been building toward violence suddenly transformed into anticipation for something unprecedented. Tony, however, was not amused. "I don't want to sing with you. I want to fight you." "Well, that's too bad," Michael said, grinning now. "Because this is my stage, these are my people, and we do things my way here. You want to prove you're tougher than me? Then prove you can do what I do. Sing." Michael gestured to his guitarist, who was watching this entire scene with his mouth hanging open. "Give the man a microphone," Michael said. "And boys, he called to his band, "let's give our friend here a chance to show us what he's got." The band, still in shock but following Michael's lead, prepared to play. Tony handed a microphone, and suddenly the center of attention, in a way he hadn't expected, looked around the forum with a mixture of confusion and panic. "What? What do you want me to sing?" he asked, his aggressive tone now replaced with uncertainty. "Whatever's in your heart, friend," Michael said magnanimously. "This is your moment. 18,000 people are waiting to hear what you've got to say." What followed was both heartbreaking and oddly beautiful. Tony, clearly out of his element but trapped by his own bravado, attempted to sing "Stand By Me," apparently the only song he could think of in his alcohol-fogged brain. His performance was predictably rough. He was off-key, forgot half the words, and his voice cracked with emotion more than once. But here's what happened that nobody expected. Instead of the audience laughing at him or booing, something else began to unfold. As Tony struggled through the song, clearly embarrassed and vulnerable, the crowd began to cheer him on. "You got this! Keep going! Sing it, Tony!" Michael, standing beside him, began clapping along and nodding encouragingly. When Tony forgot the words, Michael would whisper them to him. When he started to give up, Michael put his arm around his shoulders and kept him going. When his voice cracked with emotion, Michael harmonized with him to cover the rough spots. By the time Tony finished his stumbling version of "Stand By Me," something had changed in the room. This angry, belligerent drunk who had come to cause trouble had become, for a few minutes, just another person trying his best at something difficult. The forum gave him a standing ovation, not because he sang well, but because he tried, and because Michael had created a space where even a hostile heckler could be transformed into someone worth supporting. "That was beautiful, Tony," Michael said, and he genuinely seemed to mean it. "That took real courage." Tony, now clearly emotional and no longer aggressive, looked around the arena in wonder. "I can't believe they're clapping for me," he said into the microphone. "Of course they are," Michael replied. "You just did something brave. You got up here and tried something new in front of 18,000 people. That's more than most folks ever do." "Now," Michael said, grinning at the crowd, "I suppose it's my turn." But instead of showing off with one of his signature hits, instead of demonstrating the vast difference in talent between himself and the heckler, Michael did something that revealed his true character. He sang "Man in the Mirror," his powerful song about personal change and taking responsibility for making the world better. And he made sure that Tony sang along with him, giving him harmony parts and making him feel like an integral part of the performance. The two men stood on stage together, the king of pop and an unemployed factory worker from East LA, singing about looking at yourself and making a change while 18,000 people joined in from the audience. When the song ended, Michael turned to Tony with genuine concern. "Tony," Michael said, "I want to ask you something. What made you so angry tonight? What's really bothering you?" The question, asked with such sincere care, seemed to break something open in Tony. In front of 18,000 people, this tough factory worker started to cry. I I lost my job 6 months ago," Tony said into the microphone, his voice shaking. "My girlfriend left me and took my kids. I got evicted last week. I wanted someone to pay attention to me. I wanted to matter." The forum went completely silent. Michael put his arm around Tony's shoulders. "Brother, you do matter," Michael said firmly. "You matter to me, and you matter to every person in this room. We all have times when we feel lost and angry, but you don't have to tear other people down to build yourself up." What Michael did next became the stuff of concert legend. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael announced to the audience, "I want to tell you about real courage." It wasn't Tony coming up here to cause trouble. It was Tony admitting when he was hurting and asking for help. That takes more strength than any fight ever could. Michael then announced that he was personally going to help Tony find work in Los Angeles, and that if anyone in the audience owned a business and needed a reliable employee, they should contact his management team after the show. "Because that's what we do for each other," Michael said. "We help. We don't tear down. We build up." Tony stayed for the rest of the concert, sitting on the side of the stage, occasionally joining in on songs when Michael invited him. During Earth Song, Michael brought Tony center stage again, and together they delivered an impromptu verse about second chances and human resilience that left the entire forum in emotional silence. By the end of the night, Tony had gone from being the show's biggest disruption to being part of its most memorable moments. The transformation was visible to everyone in the venue. Security guards who had been prepared to forcibly remove Tony were now taking photos with him. Audience members who had initially booed him were asking for his autograph. Local news crews who had arrived expecting to report on a concert disruption found themselves documenting an unprecedented story of redemption and human connection. Michael's band members, who had witnessed thousands of concerts and every type of audience interaction imaginable, were visibly moved by what they had just experienced. In 30 years of touring, guitarist David Williams later told Entertainment Weekly, "I had never seen anything like what happened that night. Michael didn't just handle a heckler, he transformed a human soul in front of our eyes." The ripple effects of that evening extended far beyond the forum walls. Video footage of the incident, captured by audience members on early handheld cameras, began circulating among music industry professionals within days. Record executives, tour managers, and artist representatives started using the footage as a teaching tool for how to handle difficult crowd situations with grace and wisdom. 7 business owners approached Michael's management after the show with job offers for Tony. He chose a position with a small construction company, got sober with the help of company-sponsored treatment, and worked there for the next 9 years until he saved enough money to start his own contracting business. But more importantly, the story of what happened that night spread throughout Los Angeles and beyond. It became a legendary example of how to handle conflict with grace, wisdom, and compassion. The incident changed how other performers handled disruptive audience members. Instead of immediately calling security, many started looking for creative ways to turn negative energy into positive experiences. Michael showed us that every heckler is just a human being having a bad day, said comedian George Lopez, who was in the audience that night. He turned an enemy into a friend in front of 18,000 people. That's not just good showmanship. That's good humanity. For Michael, the incident reinforced his belief that his role as a performer was about more than just entertainment. I realized that night that I have a responsibility, Michael told Rolling Stone in a later interview. When someone comes to my show, whether they're a fan or a heckler, I have an opportunity to make their life a little better. That's not something I take lightly. The story of Michael Jackson and Tony Martinez became a teaching tool used in conflict resolution courses and cited by therapists as an example of how to de-escalate tense situations through empathy and understanding. Tony Martinez, before his death in 2019, gave several interviews about that night. In each one, he credited Michael with saving his life by showing him that there were better ways to deal with pain than lashing out at others. Michael could have humiliated me in front of all those people, Tony said in his final interview. Instead, he helped me find my dignity. He turned the worst night of my life into the beginning of a better life. The confrontation between Michael Jackson and Tony Martinez reminds us that behind every act of aggression is usually a person in pain. It shows us that the strongest response to hostility isn't more hostility. It's understanding, compassion, and the willingness to see the humanity in everyone. Michael could have had Tony thrown out, could have made jokes at his expense, could have used his power and position to humiliate him. Instead, he chose to help him, to heal him, and to show 18,000 people what real strength looks like. That's why nearly 30 years later, people still talk about the night Michael Jackson turned a heckler into a friend. It wasn't just great entertainment, it was great humanity. And in a world that often seems divided by anger and misunderstanding, maybe that's exactly the kind of story we need to remember. Today, there's a small memorial plaque at the Forum that reads, "In memory of the night when conflict became compassion, September 23, 1996. Every major artist who performs there learns about Michael Jackson's example, and many have been inspired to handle their own difficult audience situations with similar grace. The concert where Michael Jackson stopped his show because of a drunk heckler proved that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is love, and that the strongest people are those who choose to lift others up rather than tear them down. If this incredible story of turning anger into understanding moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of choosing compassion over conflict. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's kindness completely changed your perspective? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the moments that reveal the best of human nature.